Hi everybody, and welcome to Traveling with Russell, and welcome to Moscow region, and welcome to Park Patriot. Now I'm around about 60 kilometers from Moscow today, and I'm here at a military museum that's got a very interesting exhibit going on right behind me. We're going to go for a walk around and have a look at it and see if we can see something that's interesting and perhaps something maybe that you haven't seen before here on the channel. Before I head on inside, where I actually am here is a place called Park Patriot. It's a very well-known park and military exhibit and museum that's here in the southwest of Moscow. Definitely, I'll put the links in the description. If you're in Moscow, it's definitely worth a visit. It actually has a very big museum dedicated to the Great Patriotic War, and then going back to what I would call World War I. In Russia, they have slightly different names for it. And it's a huge territory, and it's so big they've actually got their own bus stops to get around. And where we want to go to is this exhibit here, which is basically an exhibit showing the NATO captured equipment and all of the things that were brought from the special military operation back to Russia, then put on a display here. If you are a follower of my channel, you'll probably know that I did a video showing some tanks and military equipment in Moscow back in May during the Victory Day events, and this actual display here has actually been here months before that, I would say even 6 months earlier, and they took some of the objects from this display and then brought it to Moscow for public display in the center of the city, and then eventually everything that was there will come back here to be put on display at this expo. Now I'm going to keep saying different words, so I hope that makes a bit of sense. And now a lot of people think perhaps the one in Moscow was staged. Now a lot of that was put on display around the Victory Day events in Russia, which is held once per year, and where they signify the end of the Great Patriotic War. And then now, going back, or going forward so many years, this display has been set up, and it's showing the equipment that is from mostly the NATO countries and then recovered back to Moscow on here in Patriot Park. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk on up to the entrance. Now I have actually filmed this in different parts and then put it together in order of how I've walked around. So they now, when you come here, you actually have to come on a guided tour, and they have so many tickets per half an hour to come on this tour. And then what they do is you basically have to wait till the tour starts. Then you're actually given headpieces where you can actually get the tour in Russian, English, and Chinese. And this is essentially the group waiting here to go in now. And then from here I'm going to head on inside and give you my tour of this event. So coming on inside, there's this big tent or building that's got all of the equipment on display here. So I'll go for a bit of a brief walk around and try to point out some things to the best of my knowledge, or at least you can probably figure it out from a lot of the signs and flags that I'll show you. One of the first things you actually see when you walk in is the very famous Humvee, and this has been an absolute staple of the British military for a lot of years. And as I walk around, there is signs that talk about the different equipment, and there's a flag from the country, and then they point out also the place where it was recovered from at some point. And then there is actually a way that you can walk around the exhibit here, and there's quite a lot of things to see. It's a little bit hard to kind of maybe cover in one video, but at least if I can show some things, it will be at least a little bit interesting. The very famous Humvee, and I wonder if that number plate is relevant or not. And what they've done, they've actually put it into a display here to essentially recreate perhaps where it was recovered from, and the condition it was in at that point. They do have a sit-down part of the display here where they talk about some of the events that are currently happening in Ukraine and some of the things that are being taught in the schools in Ukraine as well, which is kind of interesting for it to be explained to you. You can see here some of the combat patches from the current events going on. And then what I'll do is I'll just walk around as much as I can and then show basically what I'm looking at. Now, there is actually signs in Russian and a little bit in English, but I guess the flags make it a little bit easier to understand. So I really need to point out that I'm in no way able to explain about specific things that I'm looking at here, or the certain model of something. I've just come to see this display and this exhibit for myself because I thought it was poignant that I went to the one in Moscow and then come to this one here in Moscow region, which has actually been here quite a lot longer than the one that was quite famous on television going back a few months ago. And this is essentially a ongoing exhibit that they've set up. Of course, some of the objects that are here are not the whole item. I mean, essentially it's what they've recovered and then what they've identified as parts from certain objects. And we can see here the Storm Shadow. And then the one that I've heard a lot about is this HIMARS. Now, I'm pretty sure it's an acronym for something a little bit longer. And then they've actually got some of the pictures of what they look like in their full design, and then showing how they get launched. And this is basically the remnants of that. And then coming around to this corner, then they've got a display of the different drones or unmanned aerial vehicles. And these aren't small objects. These particular couple on the middle right here are like small aeroplanes. They're really very big pieces of equipment. There's a Stinger shoulder launch rocket there as well. And they've also got some of the commercial drones that are in use. They've actually got the Chinese flags on them, being that they're DJI manufactured. And I think this is one that's locally produced. These are a little bit hard to see on camera, probably a little bit easier to see in person. And again, they've got the signs that talk about them and these different models. The Skywalker. Well, they almost look like they're homemade. They don't look like manufactured models. It's just interesting to see them as close as you can here. And then at the back there, from Turkey, I'm not sure if that's the Austrian flag in the very back. They've actually got here a small field hospital set up, and then everything that you see is things that have been recovered from Ukraine back to Russia and then placed here as a display to show you what it would look like, what some of the items are. And they also are showing here the American MRE and all the things that were inside it. There's quite a lot of videos on YouTube of people doing taste testing of these, and even people taste testing the Russian one versus the American one. And you can see this small field hospital. They've even got a heater at the back there. Obviously, a lot of things were in winter. And then this British armored personnel carrier. Just interesting, being that we're in Russia, and you see the Made in USA right on the plastic container there. It's really just so strange to see that here in Moscow. Of course, we know so many American brands, but then to see it on military equipment. This is the British Saxon. It's also got the hospital cross on the side there. And you can see all of the different medical equipment and kit, and how everything is essentially untouched, and where they've took different pieces of equipment. The medical paramedics bag. They've got the entire backpack. And then, of course, some of the scenes that they've set up, you know, aren't particularly nice to see, because obviously it's depicting what it would look like. You can actually even go inside the back of the vehicle here. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's got the beds right there. And the whole idea, of course, of these museums and displays is to show you what it looked like, and at the time that things were recovered. Even they're showing the stretchers with the American flags on them as well. And then one of the vehicles here. Now, this has actually got a Ukrainian flag on it, but it's based around a Chinese design, the actual body of the actual vehicle. One of the vehicles from Great Wall, if you might know that name. It's almost like a bread van, but it's got a little bit of military design at the back there. It's a little bit bright from here, but we're going to head on outside and have a look around at some of the vehicles in the outside part of this exhibit. Then we'll come back in and cover some of the other parts of it on the way back. Coming outside, they actually have a lot of the other tanks and armored personnel carriers. I think might be the best way to describe them. They have here one of the American M113 tanks, and you can see some of the damage it's taken at the front. Actually mostly bullet holes, I guess. You can see here where they've actually marked on the side the places where it's taken different types of bullets. I think someone's even marked the size or the type of artillery that struck it. Now they do actually have the European, or I guess that's an international flag that they put on it as well. It's actually in surprisingly good condition, considering that it got destroyed and then recovered back to Russia. Just all of these bullet holes everywhere. So I wonder perhaps how it got struck. It doesn't say on the sign. They do actually have signs that give you a bit more information about it, but it's not mentioned on there. So this is the building that we've walked out of, where it had all of the small arms and drones and different things inside. And then as we look around a little bit more, there's some of the other tanks and machinery, and some of them are in fairly different condition, being that this display's been here for more than a year now. Of course, they weather outside at the same time, so not only do they get destroyed, they also start to rust where some of the coatings come off the front of them, and literally in the condition that they were recovered in is exactly how they placed them here like this. It's interesting, the difference in the condition. Here's another American one. Transport the personnel of the unit and their fire support. An export version produced under a US license in the Netherlands. So they actually outsourced some of the production of these, perhaps because they can't produce enough of them inside America. I must admit, where we are here, it's very, very quiet. It's actually a very big forest area in the southwest of Moscow. We're about 70 kilometers from Moscow here, and there's really not a whole lot around this territory where we are. So it's just so quiet. There's another tank right here. T-72. So they do actually have on each of these signs where it was actually recovered from or brought from, right here. So if you're interested where this specific one came from during the current events going on, you can actually read that on the sign if you want to. In no way do I confess to knowing really anything about these pieces of machinery, and coming out to see this expo or exhibit, it's really interesting, especially the fact that you can get up close with them and learn about them. Now, they do actually have guided tours that you can take to do the walk around here, and it's a little bit awkward because they're essentially walking you from spot to spot and then giving you the information about what you're looking at. But then if you just walk a little bit behind everybody, you can then get up close and basically walk around freely. And it's really interesting. Most of these are all Ukrainian flagged vehicles. But I'm not sure if they were all specifically made in the Ukraine or they were produced somewhere else, then given to Ukraine and then rebadged. The BTR 4E, you can see, this took a fair whack right here on these front windows. The rest of the vehicle though looks pretty good. It's just very specific places where it's taken some kind of artillery. Again on the windows on this side as well. It's really just amazing how good of a condition a lot of these are in. Of course, there's some that are fairly well destroyed, but then in general, these are all pretty much completely usable if they were to be put back into service, if that makes sense. You can see here again where they're showing the maps and the region of Ukraine where these were brought from. Wow. This territory we are here is actually also an active military museum. So this specific place where I am here is dedicated only to what they call NATO equipment. And then the rest of the grounds are part of a bigger display that shows a lot of the equipment from the Great Patriotic War. The tour group that I'm part of here is just slowly walking back on inside. Now, when I've come here in the past, they didn't have an organized tour, and you were able to completely walk around without anybody. And now they have somebody that guides you, and actually there's an audio tour that you can follow as well. Now there is a few more pieces of equipment up here which weren't part of the display at the Victory Park, or Park Patriot, if you remember back a few months ago. So this particular place here, where it's an active museum, they're going to slowly build out this display more. I think this is one of the radar station trucks. And then where the fence is right here is actually all of the Russian equipment, which is part of the museum here at Park Patriot. And literally this is a free walking museum. It's actually huge, that you can walk around. Well, they do also have some boats here as well, and these are all marked as Ukrainian boats and in different condition. They look almost like patrol boats. I wouldn't probably necessarily call them military style, but I guess they're built in that way. You can see again some of the bullets and the places where they've took enemy fire. Now there's a few different models here, and then perhaps one of these was mounted on one of the boats, and definitely now it's not. And you can see on the side here some of the artillery shots that it's taken. And it's really interesting. These weren't part of any other display in Moscow around the Victory Day displays that were in the center of Moscow, and then they brought these here. This looks like some sort of a mine. Wow. An anchor sea mine, designed to defeat surface ships and enemy vessels in coastal waters. Holy dooly. Ultimately, I wanted to see if they had the Australian Bushmaster here, and the one that was in Moscow back during the Victory Day events in Moscow. And it seems like it hasn't made it back here. There is some of the equipment that was actually there. Now this actual display has been here more than a year. I think about a year and a half in total. Probably most people didn't know this existed, and this was set up as a new, basically, museum or a display that's part of Park Patriot behind me over on this side. And they took quite a lot of the equipment from this display to Moscow for the Victory Day display, which if you've seen my past video, it'll make a little bit of sense. Or if you've watched other news stories where they showed the different American and German equipment, and then they had an Australian Bushmaster. Actually, they had it here originally, and then they moved it to Moscow, and the plan is to bring it back here. And I was thinking that it was here for this video, but perhaps I'll have to come back on another occasion to check it out. These are actually all the signs of the different equipment that was taken to the Moscow display, and I showed these in my previous video. The Husky, the Mastiff, these were both British vehicles, and they actually have the sign back there for the Bushmaster, and these were the signs that they had on display at the exhibit in Moscow at Park Patriot. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the names correct for you. And actually they had the South African Mamba as well. And perhaps they're going to come back soon. There's plenty of space for them to be displayed here. Okay, back on inside Just need my eyes to adjust a little because it was so bright outside. And then in here, it's not very well lit. It's really designed to create a bit of a mood when you walk around. They have some of these metal detectors as well. Now, one thing that's interesting for me is the condition of a lot of things. And of course, a lot of things are from different countries, and there's obviously a fascination with seeing equipment from other countries, particularly while you're here in Russia, and where people would really never have a chance to travel anywhere and go to a museum in another country, and then to come here. Now, this one right here, I'm certain this is the Austrian flag, the Pinsgauer. Now, I'm actually watching a YouTube channel at the moment where they're actually converting one of these into a camper or a mobile home. And it's a 6-wheel vehicle like this. The one they're actually converting was a fire truck though. It's just interesting when I saw the sign, and it made sense, the different type of vehicle that it was. You can see the condition of some things that they've recovered where they're literally destroyed. And there's here some of the radar equipment and different, I'm not sure, radio equipment. Actually a handheld one here with the Trimble brand on it, the Harris RF. Now this is almost a little bit surreal because, you know, in years gone by where different countries would set up museums, they would perhaps swap equipment for displays. So you would see things that were given or donated to museums, and then you come here and see things that are literally, brought here from the nearest country and put on display. Very famous American Starlink, and then has a piece of equipment here. Now, there is actually on the roof over here this very big Starlink. It's almost like a dish. Now, I'm pretty sure the dish is the part of the ground equipment, and then it's showing a little satellite there. So if anybody knows more about how Starlink works, let me know. There's one there from Czech Republic, I think, as well. And then some of the smaller handheld radio equipment. So literally the walkie-talkies, Motorola, very well-known brand. And maybe some of these were mounted on some of the equipment or the vehicles, I think. Different flags. There's one there with a Korean flag on. So yeah, very interesting. There's a few more drones here. These are very much industrial drones. This DJI one, they use this for farming, and these are big drones. When you're actually standing next to them, they are just huge. And really how they've been adapted to this use. All the flags here with the launchers. And there's a destroyed plastic drone right there. The Pioneer Knight. And then they've got some video footage of some of the recovered items that they're showing. And there's a tiny drone right here. Have a look how small this is. This thing is just tiny. So it's really just almost surreal to see this. I'm actually really fortunate to be able to walk around this part of the exhibit after the group that I was on left, and it's in between the next tour. And I'm right here about lunchtime, so I'm pretty sure I'm right here on the overlap of the lunch break for the staff. So it's a little bit interesting. This is actually the Kraken, which we saw the sign for outside, which is a South African vehicle. Now, please in the comments let me know, has South Africa given these vehicles to Ukraine? Now, what I understand is that they were actually sent from South Africa to somewhere in Europe and then sent on to Ukraine at some point later. This thing's got a few pieces of damage in the window. You can actually see up on the roof there, I think that's one of the Storm Shadow drones, that's what it's called. And then they've got some of the mines and different pieces of artillery. So some of them are not here because they were originally at the display in Moscow, and then they'll make it back here to this display. The M72. It's quite interesting. They've got the different flags next to each other. German flag right there. And then this beast of a vehicle here, the Mine Wolf. So this is obviously mine-sweeping style vehicle. Well, very interesting. They've also got some videos running as well of some of the equipment and showing, you know, some of the things that are actually here as well, based on some of the video and television coverage that they have. I really hope you're enjoying this video. Now, it's very hard to say that for this type of video. I mean, perhaps it's something that you haven't seen before or hasn't been documented before. Of course, everybody went to the one in the center of Moscow and showed that. And this one has actually been here long before that. And this one is where you can actually come to the museum and then see these objects up close without all the people here. And I am literally the only person. My group left a little while ago that I was part of the tour when I came in, when I first arrived. They have a lot of different weapons on display. And again, there's all the different flags of all the different countries. Now, for me, some of these don't look as modern or as new as all the events that are going on. There's one there with a Canadian flag on. It's just so fascinating to see the condition of them and how they look, and you know how they've ended up. Essentially, it's like a flags of the world display, which is hard to take in really when you are from somewhere perhaps not from Russia, and then you come here to see this, the Swedish flag, and then these display boxes. The very well-known javelin, I think, has been very well talked about and documented. There's quite a few different versions of this, and you can actually see the whole storage of them. And have a look on the side there. Troy, Alabama. I've actually got all of the information about them. This one here's got Arlington, Texas. So maybe they produce different parts in different cities in the US. Now, I was having a look at this British one because I was quite interested in this versus the American one. And these price between $20,000 and $40,000 each, which is, for one piece of equipment. There's more different models of them. And these aren't small pieces of equipment as well. The Stinger. Well, there's actually a couple of the stuff here setting up the display and basically tweaking it, how it looks. This last part of the display, which is almost near the entrance and exit, they've got this red light going on, which makes it a little bit hard to see things clearly. All the different flags, again, from not just America and England, but other countries as well. I would imagine some of these were perhaps provided to third countries and then brought then ultimately to Ukraine. There's an Israeli flag right there. Wow. And then these big Browning M2. Have a look at this thing. Holy dooly now. I don't really attest to anything that happens where these things are used. This is the famous howitzer 777. Now there was one of these on display in Moscow in the center, so perhaps they've got a few of these in Russia. This thing is just massive. It's hard to even put it into a perspective of how big it is. These are manned by, I think, 8 people to use them. Wow, it's a very big piece of equipment. I think they must be gas powered in some form or hydraulically fired. Maybe somebody knows more than I do about them. Now the actual direction of the sun isn't doing me any favors filming in this part of the display. And they've got this very big Ukrainian flagged vehicle. Now a lot of these are personnel carriers, and the fact that they're wheeled versus tracked, and just very big pieces of equipment. And the way they've got it displayed with the children's playground right here is not something that's, you know, good to see. And they've got some specifics about it right here. It's in very good condition again, and I point this out quite a few times as I've walked around. So I've made my way outside the exhibit now. Now I have said it's an exhibit, I have said it's a museum, I have said it's an exposition. Now of course you can make your mind up what it is that I'm showing you, and perhaps if you want to comment about it, please let me know your thoughts on what you're seeing or what you've seen. And you know, for me, I've known about this display for quite a long time, going back last year. Now I live only 15 kilometers from here, and from my balcony window I can actually see this territory, and it's not that far away. But to come here, it's essentially a train ride and then 2 bus rides to get here. So it's not simple just to turn up and come and make videos. So I thought I'd come today. Now actually today's Tuesday on a working day here in Russia, so there's not that many people here compared to coming on a weekend. And I thought it would be easier also to make the video with less people as I'm walking around. And it's worked out very good actually. I was on a tour and then the tour left, and I was able to walk around myself with a little convincing of the guard that was there, but he was okay because he knew that I was making a video. So please let me know what you think. Now I was hoping to show the Australian Bushmaster, which I know was previously on display here, and then they took it to Moscow for the display for Victory Day, which if you've not seen that video, it might be worth having a look at. I will link that video for you to check out. And the idea was they were going to bring back those vehicles to this ongoing museum display, but it's not here. So I really wanted to see that Australian vehicle here in the territory close to where I live. Now, it's not that close, but This actual area, Park Patriot, is a huge territory. I mean, literally, there's bus stops to get around because it's that big. If you come by car, it's obviously much simpler, but if you've done like me and caught the bus and the train, it's a little bit harder to get around. So yeah, I'm hoping to film another couple of videos while I'm here. We'll see how it goes today. It's a little bit difficult to just simply turn the camera on and film things, and you know, versus doing them in supermarkets and, you know, showing what I've shown. So please let me know in the comments where you're from, and perhaps if you recognized or saw something that you may know a little bit about, please put it in the comments. You know, I know that Australia is a part of what's going on, and the Bushmaster, the vehicle, has been heavily talked about on Australian news, and then the fact that it really doesn't get talked about, the fact that there's one here in Moscow, or what's happened to them since they were sent to the ongoing events right now. So yeah, it's just interesting for me. I'm not as jovial and as bouncy as I am normally for videos. This is obviously a bit of a sensitive topic for some people, and this video is probably going on a little bit longer than some of the videos that I make, so I hope it's come across okay. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Again, post in the comments. I have talked about a lot of things during this video. If you want to join me on Telegram, my link is right here. If you've not heard of Telegram, it's like WhatsApp, a little bit different, but quite the same. And if you want to watch the older video that I did where I was in Moscow at the NATO military equipment display, I'll pop that video up right now. And if you haven't seen it, it might be worth checking out to get a bit of an understanding of some of the other vehicles that aren't actually at the display. Okay, everybody, I'm off on another adventure. Bye.